Okay, I call to order the City of Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals for March the 22nd. Carmen, can you please call the roll?
Here.
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 Okay. We have two sets of minutes to be approved this evening, and we'll vote on those separately. We have the minutes from the October 19th meeting. I will, do I hear a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
Second.
Second. Oh. Carmen?
Yes.
Stewart Gillies? Yes. Clapper?
Yes. Okay, and then the second set of meeting minutes are from December the 21st. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I so move that we approve those minutes.
Second.
Carmen, roll please.
Yes.
Yes.
Stewart Gillies? Yes.
Okay. On to reports, resolutions, and communications. Before we do an election of officers, is there anything further, Jackie?
Think today.
Okay, so we're going to elect officers for the Board of Zoning Appeals 2018, and we'll do these in two separate motions. I will entertain a nomination for president.
I move Barry Clapper for that.
Second.
Thank you. I will accept the nomination, and if we could have a vote.
Okay. Stewart Gillies?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Okay. And moving on to vice president, do we have a nomination for vice president? He wants to be.
I nominate Joe Throckmorton.
Okay, I second that.
Okay. Throckmorton?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Stewart Gillies?
Yes.
Okay, we have our new officers for 2018. Thank you. Okay, we have tonight two petitions which are continued. Petition V-5-18, Shayar Denishgar, and petition V-37-17, Dwellings LLC. The three petitions we have on our docket this evening are CU-0318, Paul and Carol Gillard, CU/V-04-18, Margie and Drew Schrader, and CU-06-18, Christopher Sturley. We are ready for the first petition. Staff report, please.
Great, thanks. So the first petition tonight is CU-0318. The property is located at 425 East Kirkwood Avenue. And the existing use on the site is a mixed-use building, and the ground floor is currently vacant. The property is zoned commercial downtown, and it is located in the University Village overlay. The GPP designation, which this was filed under the GPP, even though our comp plan was just approved, is downtown, and the surrounding uses of the property are restaurants, retail, and multifamily residential. So the request tonight is for a conditional use approval for standardized business, and you can see here in the image the location, the street view of the location where they're requesting to go in. So this is the property immediately adjacent to Nick's English Hut that used to have a Panda Express in it, and it temporarily housed Bloomington Bagel Company while their new building was under construction. And the petitioner is requesting to open a Five Guys Burgers and Fries in this location, and they are requesting no changes to the exterior of the building. So that's just a little bit closer view. The Unified Development Ordinance requires a conditional use approval for standardized business in this overlay district. And so we define that as any type of commercial business establishment, not including commercial businesses located in such a manner as to be devoid of any building frontage which is visible to a street, located in Courthouse Square overlay and University Village overlays, which are required by contractual or other arrangement or affiliation to offer or maintain standardized services, merchandise, menus, employee uniforms, trademarks, logos, signs, or exterior design. So as you can imagine, Five Guys Burgers and Fries does fit this definition, and so they have to request the conditional use in order to locate here. Again, they are proposing no exterior changes to the building. The building has housed multiple restaurants since it was built, and the only changes will be that they think that they would like to propose in the future some cafe seating to be added in front of the building, so similar to what Nick's has, but would be set farther back. Staff found no nuisance or adverse impacts, and the only other change visible from the road really would be a sign package, which they have not yet submitted, but do understand what the code requirements are and would be meeting those. So the department recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals adopt the proposed findings that were included in your report and approve CU 0318 with the condition that this approval is particular to this particular standardized business request, including the fact that no exterior changes to the building are allowed. So I can answer any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you. Petitioner, representative, would you like to come to the podium? Do you think? If you could state your name, please, and then I'll swear you in.
Hello, I'm Carol Gillard.
Okay? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And who are you?
I am Paul Gillard.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, you have 20 minutes to state your petition. And if you don't want to use that time, that's fine. We can hold it in case there are questions later.
We have nothing specific prepared, but we'd be happy to answer any questions that you would have for us.
Okay. Great. Thank you. So we're back to the board for questions. Anything?
No.
You? I don't either? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go to the public. Does anybody have any questions of this petition? Okay, seeing none, we'll come back to the petitioner. If you have any additional comments before we take a vote.
I think the only thing that may be important for you to know is that we are Bloomington residents. We do live here. We're not managing or running the operation from some off-site or some other city far away. We'll be right here in town, and if everything goes well, we certainly look forward to being in that space.
Great. So we're back to the board for action.
I'd like to make one comment before a
Sure.
motion's made. I want to reiterate again, as we do at these times, that BZA does not operate on precedent. Therefore, any action that we take on this particular petition will have no bearing on future
Sure.
requests that are similar, and it will not be based, the decisions will not be based or informed by decisions that were made in the past in terms of offering a zoning variance.
Okay. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve
Okay?
CU 0318.
I second?
Okay. Any further questions or comments before we vote? Okay, we're ready to vote. Karen?
Clapper,
Yes.
Rockmore,
Yes.
Sturtevant.
Here. Yes.
Petition is granted. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very
for your
much.
consideration.
Okay.
Thanks, Jack.
Our next petition is CU/V-04-18, Margie and Drew Schrader. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mary. This is a request from Margie and Drew Schrader for an accessory dwelling unit. The petitioners are requesting a conditional use approval to allow an accessory dwelling unit on a property that is zoned residential core. This is located at 2621 South Milton Drive, and the sorry.
Lincoln.
Sorry, I didn't update one of my slides here. So the petitioners are at 1009 South Lincoln Street. I apologize there for the the miscommunication. So the property is zoned residential core. The petitioners do live at the residence, and they are requesting to allow one of the, or the only accessory building on the property to be converted into an accessory dwelling unit. So you can see here in the aerial photograph on the south side of the site, the petitioners have a detached garage that is located along the alley, and the petitioners are requesting to convert this into a garage. They are also requesting a variance from the side yard building setback requirements. While the UDO allows or exempts existing structures, existing single-story structures from meeting side yard setbacks when they are being converted, because this building is a two-story structure, it is not exempt from the side yard setback requirements. So they are also requesting a variance from the side yard setback requirement of 5 feet to allow the existing structure. The existing structure is about 0 feet, and there is a platted public alley on the south side of the property, as well as along the east side of the property. The board in the past, as well as staff, has oftentimes heard requests requesting a variance from side yard setbacks when there is a platted alley, and the presence of the alley provides the setback and open space that is desired on properties, especially between adjoining properties. So the presence of the alley does help offset the lack of the required 5-foot setback on this site. The petitioner has submitted a couple pictures of the existing structure. There will be some improvements done to the structure to help make it livable. Some siding will be replaced. There will be interior remodeling. Plumbing and sewer will be extended to the garage as well, all to make the structure a little bit more habitable and friendly. So the petitioner has looked through and meets the requirements for the accessory dwelling unit. As I mentioned, the site is owner-occupied. The main residence is owner-occupied by the petitioner. It meets the size restriction of less than 440 square feet. And there are not any, this is the first accessory dwelling unit that has been approved in this area. So it is, meets the 300-foot separation distance. The petitioner also went to the Bryan Park Neighborhood Association to solicit any comments from them. The Neighborhood Association did not have any or express any negative concerns or comments regarding the petition. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use request as well as the variance request per the recommended findings in staff's report, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Petitioner's representative, do you want to step to the podium, please? If you could state your name.
Hi, I'm Margie Schauer.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, you have 20 minutes to present your petition.
Oh, my goodness. I think the only thing I would say is, as you can see, it's kind of a story and a half, and nothing on the outside except a nicer, it'll look nicer, but nothing structural will change. So I certainly don't have much to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So questions for petitioner staff?
For staff, please remind us what the purpose of the change in this new ADU that the city council approved, what the purpose of that, of allowing these types of dwellings?
Yep, so the main purpose, were not a main, but there were a couple of them. One was to kind of promote affordable housing opportunities within neighborhoods, to give property owners the ability to generate a little bit more income, as well as provide places for aging relatives to live on site. So it was kind of, twofold: one, affordable housing; two, to help preserve existing historic stock of houses. So allowing these accessory units to be converted into ADUs provided a little bit more income for residents, helped them keep houses from turning into rentals, as well as, a lot of it, and this is what staff heard over the years, was providing locations for relatives to live on site while not being in the main house with the rest of the family. So those are the main objectives that the City Council and the Plan Commission, as well as the community as a whole, was looking to accomplish with the ADUs.
And then could you also reiterate what the relationship status needs to be, if any, between the owner-occupier and the unit?
Yep, so the entire property as a whole is still held to the family definition, so no more than 3 unrelated adults can live on the property.
Thank you.
Carol, do you have any questions? If there are any changes to the exterior of the structure, windows, what have you, will that be?
Yep, so
reviewed by
those would still
HPC?
be bound by the demolition delay ordinance.
Okay.
So any historic structures would need to go to the HPC for review.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so are there any members of the public who would like to comment? Okay, please step to the podium. Please state your name.
My name is Lauren Wood.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have 5 minutes.
I just want to say I strongly support this. I have worked on this home. I'm very familiar with the property. I think that, as Eric mentioned, I think that this specific site and this specific structure really meets the spirit of what the city council was trying, or what was approved with the accessory dwelling units. And these pictures don't do justice to how awesome this little place is. And I think that allowing this particular project to move forward will achieve the stated goal of making this home site, which is a very small home, more affordable as an owner-occupied option moving forward, and keep it in an owner-occupied status rather than letting it turn over into a rental or whatever future use could happen if this weren't there. So I strongly support and hope you guys vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, and we are back to the petitioner for any final comments.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. So to the board for action or comments?
Could you go back to the slide on your recommendation? So I just want to make sure that I'm seeing this again based on Barry's comment about if any exterior changes are made.
Mm-hmm.
So,
The conditional
That
use
was all I
approved
needed.
by accessory.
thank you. I'm good.
Okay, you're good?
Yeah.
Okay,
You
I
good?
just want to comment that I'm familiar with this house, and this is a really compact footprint, and so I think the ability for the owner to be able to expand their living space this way really makes a lot of sense. So I'll be voting for this. Okay, if no further comments?
I move approval of CU-V/V-04-18.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Carmen, roll please.
Yes.
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 Petition is granted. Thank you very much. Good luck. Okay. We are on to our third and final petition, CU-06-18, Christopher Sturley. Staff report, please.
Thank you. This is another request for conditional use approval to allow an accessory dwelling unit. The petitioner, Christopher Sturley, lives at the residence at 2621 South Milton Drive. The property is zoned single-family residential. There are actually 2 accessory structures on this particular property, which you can see in this aerial photograph. There is an existing detached garage that is on kind of the north side of the site, as well as a small little storage shed that is on the south side of the site. Seen here is a picture of the shed. The shed actually is probably not the best word for it, as it's been kind of improved in a little bit over the time. But the petitioner would like to convert this structure into an accessory dwelling unit. As I mentioned previously, the UDO exempts single-story structures from meeting side yard or rear yard setback requirements. This does not meet the side yard setback requirement the rear yard setback requirement, but is exempt from meeting that per the UDO standards. So they do not need to request a variance in order to allow for this to be converted into an accessory dwelling unit. The petitioner does live on the site. The proposed accessory dwelling unit meets or does not exceed the allowed interior space, the 440 square feet. It does meet. The petitioner is living on the property and is aware of all the requirements that go along with converting this into an ADU. They are aware that they need to live on the site and has looked at the conditions of approval, specifically the commitment requiring that The ADU cannot be sold separately. There will be some minor improvements to the interior of this to extend water and sewer to it, to make it livable. And with that, we do find that it meets all of the requirements that were set forth in the UDO for the ADUs, the size, the owner occupancy, the proximity to any other ADUs, which there are not. So staff is recommending approval of this conditional use for the accessory dwelling unit as well, with the 3 conditions listed in staff's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Petitioner, please, if you could step to the podium and state your name.
Hello, I'm Christopher Sturley, and I live at the aforementioned property.
Thank you. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Great. You have 20 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I hope to not use all of it. I just wanted to state that during this process, it's been very informative for me to work with Eric as well as the city, and also with our neighborhood association. I'm not sure if it was mentioned in the petitioner presentation, but I have lived in the Broadview neighborhood on the south side of Bloomington for the last 2 years. And going to the Broadview Neighborhood Association meeting was really awesome because they actually offered support for us and were willing to, put in their names, I guess, if they needed to show support, as opposed to just, saying that they were for or against it. So that support of my neighborhood was very nice. It's just been very informative to get through this process and to this point. And so I believe that this kind of speaks for itself, but if you have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Does anybody, do you guys have any questions? No. No questions. Okay, is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, we're back to the board for comments or action. I will entertain a motion.
I move approval of CU-06-18.
A second. Okay. We have a motion. Carmen, can you please call roll?
Pfeffer,
Yes.
Throckmorton,
Yes.
Stewart Williams.
Yes. Petition is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. And that concludes BZA for today. Thank you.